Good afternoon, everybody. We'll start shortly, maybe in a minute or two. Before I begin, can everybody hear me? And can everybody see my screen? Because a couple times before I was starting a presentation and nobody could hear me, or I wouldn't share my screen. Perfect. Thank you. Welcome everybody for this masterclass. Some of you already might know me. My name is Andrei Strepkov. I work at iGUIDE since late 2019, and my job is to consult real estate professionals on the square footage measurements, on floor plans, and of course on 3D tours. So the title of our presentation today is ANSI Z765, and as some of you might know, that we officially introduced ANSI last month, so that's why we decided to prepare this presentation to maybe educate a little bit our operators on what ANSI Z765 is and how to use it with iGUIDE. So today we're going to structure our masterclass in the following way. First, we're going to start with some basic definitions. You might already know those definitions anyway, but we'll still go through them to make sure that we're on the same page. Then second, we're going to review some biggest rules and biggest requirements of ANSI. I'm not going to go into single requirements that they have in the document, but I'm going to cover a couple biggest points that you should know about. And of course, at the end, I'm going to show you how to actually use your measurement standard to ANSI Z765 when you use iGUIDE. What is ANSI? So ANSI is the American National Standards Institute. So it's an organization that was established in 1918, so shortly after the First World War. And what it does, it oversees the development of voluntary standards in many industries across the United States. What it doesn't do, though, it doesn't develop standards. So ANSI doesn't actually come and develop standards for you. No, they just accredit standards developed by non-for-profit organizations, sometimes governmental organizations, but these standards are coming from the industry, and ANSI just oversees their development and accredits them. What is ANSI Z765? This is one of the standards that was accredited by ANSI. So it describes the procedures to be followed in measuring and calculating the square footage of detached and attached single-family houses. So as you can see from this definition here, you cannot apply ANSI Z765 for commercial buildings, for example, or you cannot apply it for apartment buildings. So it's strictly for residential single-family houses that you would use ANSI Z765. How it was created? That's a good question here. Like why we have so many standards for everything, regulations and all that. So back in 90s, National Association of Home Builders actually conducted a research, and they surveyed multiple builders across the United States from coast to coast. And what they noticed is that everybody measured their properties differently. So it's not consistent. Somebody would include the balconies and porches in the total square footage. Some people would measure, some companies would measure paint to paint. And some people would include exterior walls. So there was no consistency in the industry. So in 1994, National Association of Home Builders started to do a research and got other real estate organizations involved. For example, the National Association of Realtors was involved in this research and the development of the future standard. So in 1996, ANSI Z765 was officially born, and it was overlooked, and it is developed by Home Innovation Research Lab. So you can find all the information about ANSI Z765 on Home Innovation Research Lab if you wanted to. So even though it was developed in 1996, this standard, it's still being regularly reviewed. So every few years, maybe every year, you can see an update to this standard. So what are the benefits of it? I think it might be obvious, but still, like, first of all, it makes the industry more transparent and makes measurements repeatable. So if two companies or two people come in and measure the same house, they will get the same results. At least they will apply the same rules when they measure. Of course, as the result, it creates the alignment across the industry. And it creates defensible methods for real estate professionals. So for example, real estate agents can refer to ANSI Z765, and it's a recognized standard. It has been around for a decade, like for a couple decades now, and it's very well known. So it's a defensible method for real estate agents, for example, to rely on. So who currently uses this standard? I might have overlooked, maybe I missed some other organizations, so excuse me here, but some of the biggest ones here. First of all, well, North Carolina Real Estate Board has a quite comprehensive and quite strict requirements in terms of how to report square footage. It's not the same case in every single state in the United States. North Carolina requires you to follow either North Carolina measurement guidelines or ANSI Z765 when you report square footage. So every real estate agent, that includes square footage in the MLS, has to follow ANSI Z765 or North Carolina measurement guidelines that are very similar to ANSI Z765. Second organization that recognizes and uses the standards as well, National Association of Realtors, that you probably heard of before of this organization. Third one is, of course, the organization that was at the roots of creation of the standard is National Association of Home Builders, and starting April 1st, Fannie Mae switched to ANSI Z765. So now appraisers are required to follow ANSI standard when they report the square footage. So what about definitions? Like I said, some of those definitions here you probably already know, but let's actually review some of them just to be on the same page. What is finished area? So according to ANSI standard, finished area is an enclosed area in a house that is suitable for year-round use based upon its location, embodying walls, floors, and ceilings that are similar to the rest of the house. So as you can see, it's not that finished area is not only the area that is, let's say, suitable for year-round use, right? It actually has to be similar to the rest of the house. So it's very specific definition of what is finished area. Grade is the ground level. I'm sure all of you know all this term. Grade refers to the ground level. A floor is considered to be above grade if its floor level is everywhere above ground. And wall thickness, well, it's the thickness of the exterior walls. Typically, standard wall thickness is 6.5 inches. And how to measure wall thickness? Well, you just measure the exterior door or window casings. Just a few more definitions for you. Interior and exterior square footage. Interior square footage is inside surface of the exterior wall, so it's pane to pane, typically. Exterior square footage, it's a surface determined by measuring the outside surface of the exterior walls. And finally, ceiling height is the clear vertical line, a distance from the finished floor to the finished ceiling. Typically, the ceiling height is somewhere between 8 and 9 feet. Now, let's jump right into some of the ANSI Z765 requirements. First of all, exterior and interior square footage. How do you measure it according to ANSI Z765? Well, when it comes to exterior square footage so when it comes to detached houses, it's pretty simple. So you just measure and you just include the exterior walls. So you measure the exterior square footage for detached houses. But when it comes to attached houses, it's not necessarily obvious because you measure to the central line between the units. So for example, if you have a condominium or townhouse, so it's attached house. In this case, you would measure the wall thickness to the central line between the units, between the two units. So it's not necessarily that obvious because quite often people would measure, and for example, in Alberta, there is a different standard called Alberta RMF, and it requires, in these cases, you would measure pane to pane. You would not include the wall. But according to ANSI, you include the wall to the central line. So it's quite important to understand the difference here. What about the situations when you have attached garage? So garage is obviously not finished area, but what do you do about it? The explanation for cases like this. Where finished and unfinished areas are adjacent on the same level, the finished square footage is calculated by measuring to the exterior edge or unfinished surface of any interior partition between the areas. So essentially you measure to the exterior wall on the side of the garage, if it makes sense. So you don't have to really worry that much about it. We at iGUIDE will take care of it as long as you provide us all the information, as long as you scan the house properly and provide us the wall thickness. So you don't have to worry about these details that much. Second big part of how ANSI works and what ANSI requires is how you deal with ceiling height. For the room to be included in the total square footage, the ceiling height has to be at least 7 feet. So let's say you come into the room and the whole room is 6 feet. It cannot be included in the total square footage. You can still report it. You can include it separately, but it cannot be included in the total above grade square footage. However, if under beams or ducts, it must be at least, the ceiling height must be at least 7 feet and 4 inches. So that's something to keep in mind. But what about sloped ceilings? Because there are quite a lot of situations where you have sloped ceilings, and in this case, to be included, at least 50% of this room height should be 7 feet for 50% of this room. No portion of the room with less than 5 feet can be included. So what it means, for example, you have, first of all, scenario number one, you have 60% of the room that is, or let's say only 30% of the room has a ceiling height of 7 feet. The other 70% of the room has the ceiling height of 6 feet, for example. It cannot be included in the total square footage. However, if you have 50% of the room that has a ceiling height of 7 feet and the other part has 6 feet, the other 50%, it can be included in the total square footage. Scenario number two. So for example, you have 50% of the room that is above 7 feet, 40% of the room that is 6 feet, and then you have 10% of the room that is, let's say, 4 feet. So these 10% of the room that has 4 feet, cannot be included in the total square footage. The other part can. When it comes to stairs, the space under stairs, there is no specified requirement. So it's up to you if you want to include the space or exclude the space in the total square footage. Again, these details, we will handle these details, but it's important for you to understand, especially the ceiling height part of it. Now, there are a couple more things. So when it comes to the reporting itself, there should be a clear distinction and separation between above and below grade square footage. And we're talking about finished square footage. So for example, if you have a lot of unfinished square footage, it can be included in the report, but it cannot be included in the total above grade or below grade square footage. It's reported separately. It's included separately in the same report. So that's exactly what we are going to look at right now, how you actually create those iGUIDEs. How do you switch to ANSI standards with iGUIDE? You are probably all familiar with it already. This is the iGUIDE portal. I assume all of you already have access to this. I opened the back end of the iGUIDE that was created here. So I click edit in general settings. I click edit on the right hand side. And here I have a measurement standard. So here I can select ANSI Z765 or RMS that is used in Alberta. You can actually learn more about two standards right under the measurement standard field. There are two links here that you can use. So when you click on ANSI, it brings you straight to the Home Innovation Research Lab, the organization I mentioned earlier in this presentation. So you can find a lot of information, how these standards were created and comments and all that. So it's a very valuable resource for you if you wanted to learn more about what ANSI about ANSI Z765. For example, here I select ANSI Z765 and I get a warning here. So it says the ANSI Z765 measurements require a non-zero wall thickness to be calculated. So what it means is, like I mentioned, you have to calculate the wall thickness. If you don't, well, it's not ANSI. You're not following an ANSI standard. Like wall thickness has to be included. So how do you include this wall thickness? So for example, you calculated the wall thickness and you are switching to ANSI. So you scroll down here, and here you can do a lot of stuff. You can make a lot of nice changes to your iGUIDE. When you click on this edit floor icon right on the floor selector, when you click here, so that's the title of this floor, but here you see a perimeter wall thickness. So for example, I can indicate 6 inches. By the way, here I can also indicate if it's below grade or above grade. Typically, we would be able to, so it will on our end, we will help you with this as well. But let's say if you want it to be below grade for some reason, you can make it below grade, and it will be again reflected on the report, ANSI report. So in this case, I just leave it as just like this. So here you have perimeter wall thickness, 6 inches. I click OK. Then I would repeat the same process. I would go to the basement, and let's say again, I would use 6 inches, click OK. So you have to change every room. Well, for garage, you actually don't need to, but you have to make sure that all the floors have this wall thickness. Then I click Save. Here we go. So now we switch to ANSI standard. So here you would have ANSI square footage measurements included. But what if you want to use ANSI standards as a default? Let's say every single iGUIDE you create, you want to be following ANSI standard. There is an option for it as well. So when you click on your profile here in the top right corner, when you go to settings and go to iGUIDE default and you scroll down, so here you'll have measurement standard. So you have 3 options: system default, RMS, and ANSI. So you select here, for example, ANSI, and you just save it. And now every single iGUIDE you create will be following ANSI Z765 standard. So you don't have to manually change every iGUIDE you create. It will be automatic for you. Now, what is system default? System default is actually, so the way it works right now is that everybody from the United States and every iGUIDE created in the United States will follow ANSI Z765 standard by default. Every other iGUIDE created outside of the United States, for example, in Canada or in Europe, by default will follow RMS standard. So you don't have to, if you're, let's say, if you're located in the United States, you don't have to actually choose ANSI as a default. It will be your default anyway. One more thing that I wanted to show you. So our drafters will actually take a look at the rooms you created, and they will see if the rooms are finished or not for you. However, you have a choice to manually include and exclude the rooms. So for example, living room, I can click edit, and I can select if it's included finished, excluded, if it's exterior. So that's really up to you. So you can make it excluded, save, and that's it. So it will be excluded from the total square footage for any reason. Most likely it's going to be unfinished. So that's why you exclude it. So yeah, you have this option to change this manually in case you need it, and in case you need to. So yeah, you have total control over it. And the last thing to keep in mind that this option is, first of all, will be available with every new iGUIDE you create, and every iGUIDE created after mid-2021 you will also be able to switch to ANSI standard. So thank you very much for your time. I think these are some of the most important things that I wanted to mention and share with you today. And let's take a look at some of the questions here. So first of all, I see Dustin is asking, Is it possible to have the basement ceiling height included on the floor plans? There is no way at this point, unfortunately, to include the ceiling height right on the floor plan. Peter is asking, but it's always a guess. Does anyone have a suggestion for wall thickness measurement? You can use the measuring tape as well, tape measure, but I know some people who just automatically apply 6.5 inches by default because it's really quite common. Now we have another question. Do you think measurement standards like ANSI will be mandatory across America? So we definitely see the trend towards it. We see the trend across United States and Canada. We see that there are in some jurisdictions conversations are happening. It's really at this point, every real estate board makes this decision for themselves. Like for example, like I mentioned, North Carolina Real Estate Board has made the decision quite a few years ago, and now they have certain requirements in terms of ANSI Z765. Or for example, another great example is Alberta in Canada. They're following RMS. It's a very comprehensive standard. Again, like it's you know exactly how to measure. Like it makes it very convenient and transparent for everybody. We see conversations happening in other provinces and states as well, and there is a good chance that ANSI, for example, in United States, might become mandatory at some point. So I believe it can be the case. Okay, do you have a web page I can send to agents to that talks about ANSI? And here we go. So here Chris as well shared the document here. Here's the page. So there is a question in the chat. In measuring a condo, should we only use half the wall thickness to calculate midline measurement? Should half the wall thickness? Yeah, that's exactly what central line is. Yeah, so that's pretty much halfway, like it's half central point between, like in the wall between the two units. Yeah, so you got it. Okay, here we go. Here is one more question. Why the builder measurements are larger than our measurements? Oh, that's a great question. So never recommend to rely on the measurements coming from the developers, like a pre-built measurements, because many of those measurements, or if not all, are calculated sort of before the property was built. The reason is we get penalized for the difference, unfortunately. Yeah, you're right. And of course, for the agents, of course, they want to see bigger square footage, but it's actually dangerous situation for them. Like it's more dangerous for them, I would say, than for you, for example, as a photographer. Because okay, like for example, if agent didn't want to take your measurements and they just use the builder measurements, well, but what happens if let's say the home buyer figures out that the square footage is actually less than it was reported? They can sue the agent or the seller. Yeah, thank you very much for attending this masterclass, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was useful. I would recommend contacting me when it comes to the questions about ANSI. So here I will write my email as well. If you have questions about ANSI, you can actually reach out to tech support as well. If you have some urgent questions, you can open tickets. You can ask questions in Q&A sessions that we have bi-weekly on Wednesdays. Yeah, Chris is saying just call me to chat. I'm great at small talk. Perfect. And feel free to follow us on Facebook and other social media resources. And have a great day. See you later.